Shalom and welcome to the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. Today we're looking at Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 9. I remind you that in your English Bible this would be verse 10. We're actually starting a new subsection of the chapter here. The Lord has been announcing what he's going to do to his people in the previous verses. And in this verse and following verses, we're going to see some of Jeremiah's reaction. We actually saw some of it back in verse 2, where he wanted to run away from the people. He was so disgusted with them. And we're going to see a different attitude in these verses here, and sometimes both these things exist at the same time. Let's read the text in Hebrew as we get started. It's a long text. Al hechrim esa v'ki v'nehi v'al naot midbar kinah ki nitzitu mibali ish orer velo shama'u kol mikneh מעוף השמיים ועד בהמה נדדו halaku. So we start with al, on the mountains. So this is just our article here. It takes a slightly different form because of the following hey with mountains. So on the mountains, or concerning the mountains, I lift up. So this is an imperfect. You're used to seeing this one, I think, with the olive performative here. You only have two consonants left, but you have a dagesh there, so that's probably an assimilated letter, and that's right, that's a nun. So this is an imperfect with an olive at the beginning. It's first common singular. It's a cow, and it's going to be from our verb nasa, to lift up. There we go. I always think of NASA, which lifts up the rockets into space. So nasa, to lift up. And I will lift up baki. Baki is the word from the verb baka, which means to cry, to weep. So baki is weeping. This is not a pronoun suffix at the end. This is just the form of the word. It means weeping, and this is wailing. So these two words actually go together. This is lamentation. So baki and nehi. Weeping and lamentation. And this is what he's lifting up over the mountains, because he's seeing the devastation. And over naot, this is the plural of verb nava, which is usually written like this, with a vav in the middle of it, and in the plural, it's frequently they frequently add an olive to it. So this is the feminine noun. This means a pasture, a grazing place, and so. But it's curious that in the plural we frequently find this olive. So, and concerning grazing places of the wilderness or the desert. Again, assuming that they're picking up the same verb over here in an ellipsis way, kina. And kina is lamentation. You may be familiar with the kina meter, the 3-2 meter that we find in some passages of Scripture, especially Lamentations. So I lift up a lamentation. So you can see he's bewailing what's going on over the mountains and over the pasture lands of the wilderness. And why is this? Because now here's our one really kind of sort of complicated verb here. This is going to be nun at the beginning, not too sure about that. That might be part of the verb, might be a first common plural, but it's actually, or it could be a nifal. Well, we have an u at the end, and what we're going to have here is actually going to be a perfect, and it's going to be a third common plural, and it's going to be a nifal. Now, the surprising thing about it is that the ni here, that's the nun prefix of the nifal, and we have a dagesh here. Oh, you think, like over here, maybe that's a nun that's assimilated into it, and perhaps our verb is natsat. Well, the verb is actually yatsat with the yod at the beginning of it. And there are a few verbs, and this is one of them, there's not too many of them, that actually sort of function like a one nun verb. So like this verb up here, nasa, in certain forms, the nun assimilates down into this dagesh. Well, in this verb here, the yod assimilates into this dagesh as well. So that's what we have here, third plural nifal from this verb yatsat. And what does this verb mean? Well, this verb means to burn in the cow. So it means in the nifal would be to be burned. They are burned, referring to the pasture lands and the mountains, but especially the pasture lands. They are burned, or they are devastated. And they are devastated, mibali ish ober. Well, here's our preposition min. You can see that right in here with the assimilated nun. And bali, that's basically the equivalent of the negation lo that we find sometimes, or perhaps the negation ein that we're used to seeing, there is not. And this is found a little more in the poetic and prophetic words here. So from being not, in other words, without a man crossing over. This is just a participle from a verb avar, crossing over. So there's no man to pass through these lands. It's so devastated that there's not a single human being that passes through these lands anymore. Wow, what a vision he sees here. And he's going to continue. And there are negation and shama'u, they are not heard. They do not hear. This is, it's not a passive idea. They do not hear. One does not hear. So this is a perfect, it's a third common plural, kal, from a verb shama. And the third plural here, probably in the sense of they, meaning in a general sense, which is why sometimes it's actually translated more of a passive idea, is not heard. Something is not heard. They do not hear. No one hears, in other words. And what is it that they do not hear? The voice, actually the sound of mikne. And mikne is sort of a generic word for cattle or sheep and flocks, but especially larger cattle. So general wild stock that we would have there, cattle in a general sense. So the lowing of cattle is not heard. And from birds of the heavens, and that's our preposition, and up until, another preposition, up until animals, behema, the more general word for animals as well, and from birds of heaven unto animals, nadedu. Now that's a perfect third common plural. It's a cow, and that simply means to flee. They have fled. From the birds all the way down to the animals, they have fled. And same thing, perfect third common plural, cow, from our verb halak. They have gone away. So you can just see that there's this picture of emptiness and desolation. Wow, that's a lot of analysis here, and it's a very grim picture, and you can see why Jeremiah is lifting up his voice, bewailing this devastation that he sees in this prophetic vision. This is what is going to happen to the people and to the land because of their sin. Well, let's go ahead and hide our work here. We're actually going to have to squeeze our text down and look at just real briefly, just a couple of translations. The Tanakh, 1985, Jewish Publication Society. For the mountains I take up weeping and wailing over them concerning them. For the pastures in the wilderness, a dirge, a kina. They are laid waste. That's what we get over here. No man passes through, and no sound of cattle is heard. Birds of the sky and beasts as well have fled and are gone. And all of our translations are going to do this. Some of them might try it and just squeeze it a little bit tighter. Christian Standard Bible. I will raise weeping and a lament over the mountains, a dirge over the wilderness grazing land, for they have been so scorched that no one passes through. The sound of cattle is no longer heard. From the birds of the sky to the animals, everything has fled. They have gone away. What a devastating, sad, depressing picture. But this is what happens. And Jeremiah sees this in the vision. This is what is going to happen to you. He's trying to communicate to the people. Oh, that they would take him seriously. And oh, that people would take the Lord's word seriously, even in our own days and in our own lives as well. We'll check back with us soon as we continue working through chapter 9 in the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. Shalom.